So today I'm working on my own van. The reason for that is that it's failed its MOT on a few different things, but for this video we're going to be focusing on the brake lines. Before we have a look underneath the car, let's just talk about tooling for a second. You will need some special tools to do brake pipes. You will need a flaring tool like this one. I'm not going to waffle on about that, you'll see how that works in the video. You'll need a pipe cutter, same again, you'll see how this works, but you will need one. And then when you're practicing how to use those tools, make something like this. This is basically a fake brake pipe. So what I do is I take one brake pipe off and then I put this in to stop all the brake fluid from leaking out. I've pinched it off and I've put a little screw in the end just to belt and braces it. That should hopefully just stop you losing too much brake fluid, and it will make bleeding out the brakes at the end a little bit easier, and also gives you a little bit more time to work without panicking or making a mess. That's essentially it. The rest of it is just nuts, bolts and spanners. So now let's go under the car and I'll show you what these brake pipes look like. So before we try and undo these two brake lines, these are on the top of the rear axle. We want to undo this line here and this line here, just so you can see better. I'm going to try and move those out of the way, but first things first, we're going to spray everything down. Our good old friend WD-40. Okay, there's one out of the way, there's two out of the way. So we just want to let that soak for a minute, and then we want to come back with some WD. I said WD-40, I meant a wire wheel. I want to wire wheel this. Make sure you hold that ABS line out of the way so you don't snag it. But basically you just want to remove the dirt. So we get a real good connection on there. And then, there we go, break that loose. Just want to break loose the other side as well. With a little bit of persistence, you can get it moving. Got to be careful with this one because the line is coming with it, which means the line is stuck inside. But at least we've broken loose the threads there, which you can see are moving. That is the important thing, because this line is junk anyway, that's why we're replacing it. Okay. Oops. And I just want to very, very gently snug that up, just to stop the most of it leaking out, and that's essentially all that tool is for. Same story on the other side of this brake line. Give that little spritz of the good stuff. Let that soak. And while we're doing that, there are these little clips here all over the brake line. Easier to undo these now while it's still partially connected. Just try. There we go. Yeah, I suspected that would come loose pretty easy because I've been doing work here relatively recently anyway. These wheel cylinders are only a few months old. We have our old brake pipe removed, and we just want to make a note of what ends it's got on it, and then we'll copy those. We've got now the shape of our brake line as well. I know we've bent it slightly, but we'll just copy this shape exactly as it is here in the new copper, and then we can bend it the rest of the way into shape once it's up in the van. So the first thing to do is to cut our length of pipe roughly to length. We'll go longer, and then we'll cut it to length to its final size once we've done most of the bends. I'm going to cut my pipe just here, so the way that this tool works. These things are really simple, you've probably used one before. Just wind it on just a little bit till it catches. Turn it until it moves freely. Wind it in a little bit more. Trick is not to be too aggressive with this, otherwise you don't get a very good cut, and you do need a good cut to flare it. So even if it takes a while, persist. There we go. We've got both good ends. So you want it to be nice and rounded like this. On to the next stage, which is actually flaring it. Before you flare anything, make sure that you put on your fitting. It's absolutely imperative that you do that now and not try and do it after you flared it. This tool here is pretty easy to use. Just unwind these two tens and then you slide your pipe through the middle and then just start to snug these back down. And now what we want to do, some people tighten this down with a spanner. I don't bother with that, I just try and do it up finger tight first. But I think sometimes what you need to do is close up this. You can see that's moving. That's because the pipe is bent. So in this instance, I will actually tighten it down first to straighten out the pipe. There we go. Now I'll release those just a little bit. This basically makes sure that the pipe is the right depth inside. Make sure that's pushed up to there. And now just want to tighten these down. Okay, that's cool. Once those are tightened, you'll know when they start getting snug. Don't over tighten them. Once that's done, you will probably need a spanner to get this out. There we go. Once it's broken loose, it just comes out easy. So we want to use this end of our tool. We don't want to use the convex part. We want to use the concave part. It has a little punch in the middle to stop the hole from closing in on itself, so it doesn't seal. And if you get confused, you can just offer this up to your old brake line, and you'll know which is the right side to use because it will be the only side that will match up properly. So it's quite simple. You can't really mess it up. Well, you can if you use the wrong side. So don't do the wrong side. And then what we want to do, we get this, and this is why we have to put the stop in. This stop here that we put in first, make sure that the pipe is in the right place to flare. Now what we need to do is just tighten it down. I like to do mine slowly and gently. Copper's one of the easiest ones to flare. Aluminium's not too bad. Steel that can be really difficult. Right, that's it, snugged up. And then we just back that out. Undo our 210s. Have to take these all the way out now because you've got the flare on the end. And then that is our nice flared end there, ready to go. Now we can start bending it into shape, cut it to length, and then do this on the other side as well. So once you've shaped your brake line up to your old one, once you reach this end here, you just want to line it up, and then you just want to mark it just a few millimeters longer than the old fitting, because you have to remember that old fitting was compressed into that shape, so I always just give it an extra 3mm, and that's usually fine. And if it is slightly too long or even too short, you can, they're quite forgiving, you can usually bend it into place anyway. So now I'll just flare the other end of this line and cut it. We'll just time lapse that. Once you're done with all the flaring, you should have a nice shiny new shaped brake pipe. So we just go and bolt this up under the car. Okay, then let's get this brake line back on. Just do that finger tight for now. Clip everything back in. Try and clip this back on here, like that. And now what we want to do is we want to undo this and then get our new brake line started pretty quick. There we go, we just leave it there for now. I don't want to snug it down too much just now. And now I'll just do snug up this side here as well. Don't want to over tighten them, we can always come back in here and tighten them up again later if they're weeping slightly. That'll do us. There she is. Nice, new and shiny. Well, we've already filmed this once, so I'm not going to film it again. Here you see the old brake line. And now we have two brake lines. We've got our new one, which we'll go and fish up into the van now. So now that's both sides fitted and both sides snugged up. I'm just going to clean off any of the brake fluid that's left over. You don't want to leave it out. And I'll snug these up and then just leave them. I won't test them for whether they're leaking or not until we fill the thing back up with fluid. I like to leave them as loose as possible. You don't really want to over tighten them, because if you ever have to take them off a couple of years down the line, you'll definitely regret going gorilla style on these. Nice to get our glory shot. Make sure everything's clipped back on. Got both sides here. And we've got this brake line. I'm going to move them up over to there. It looks good. We'll bleed this out in a bit. But yeah, looking good. It's actually quite satisfying doing these. So that's it. That's how you replace the brake lines, the rear brake lines on a Ford Transit. Just beware that this is one of those jobs that can go horribly wrong when they get rusted and they haven't been touched in ages. The unions sometimes just snap off at the first sign of a little bit of torque, or if you let the master reservoir go completely dry on some cars, it's hard to bleed out the ABS pump again. So there are a few other things that need to be considered. This is quite an old van now, it's 20 years old. So everything on this is pretty simple, and that makes life a lot easier for me doing this job. And I know someone's going to ask. I just jack it up from the diff, just there, and then I just drop my stands under. Make sure you get a really good quality heavy duty jack. And that little tool I showed you for stopping the brake fluid coming out is pretty much essential just for keeping things neat and tidy. So that's it for today. If you give this job a try, let me know how you get on.